What if the coin that everyone loves to dunk on suddenly jumped to $5? And what if the math says that's only the first pit stop? I was scrolling through the usual late night rabbit hole of charts and coffee memes when I landed on a draw dropper from research Rob Cunningham. Now, the guy's not your average moon boy, right? He digs into the boring back-end plumbing of finance that most of us pretend to understand. And his new piece basically said, hey, XRP could hit $5 to $15 pretty soon, and $20 to $75 isn't crazy over the next few years. Now, you know me, right? I've heard every wild price prediction under the desert sun. So I figured, let's kick the tires on this one. And spoiler, right? The deeper that I looked, the more this felt less like hype and more like one of those beach balls that you try so hard to hold underwater. It keeps popping back up no matter how hard you push it down. Now, the first thing that grabbed me wasn't a chart at all, right? It was Ripple splashing out a cool $1.25 billion to acquire Hidden Road. Now, this is a prime brokerage that pushes $10 billion in trades every single day. So picture the busiest crypto exchange that you've ever used, and then triple it. And imagine it's quietly handling trades for hedge funds that don't waste time tweeting rocket ship emojis. Now, Cunningham's angle was actually quite simple. If even 30% of Hidden Road's daily flows start settling on the XRP ledger, then we're actually talking roughly $3 billion zipping around every 24 hours. Over a year, that's $1.5 trillion. Yep. With a T. So let's do the back of the napkin math. XRP's circulating supply sits around 54 billion coins. Now, Cunningham's figures that $3 billion a day would park roughly 2.7 billion XRP in settlement limbo at any given moment. That's 5% of the entire liquid pool suddenly off the table, locked up, unavailable to degens like us hunting for a quick scalp. Now, if you've ever tried to snipe the last slice of pizza at a party, you know scarcity turns normal people into Olympic sprinters. In markets, it turns sideways charts into, well, skyscrapers. Now, skeptics will say, fine, 5% isn't the end of the world, but step back. The last time that Bitcoin's available supply shrank by 5% in a hurry, it didn't just nudge upwards, it went full SpaceX. So when Cunningham throws out a near-term target of $5 to $15, he's not just rolling dice, he's actually pointing to a genuine supply squeeze that Hidden Road could offset, or at least set off I should say, simply by doing what it, well, already does. But supply shocks alone don't pay the bills. Now you need fresh money walking through the front door, and that's where the ETF stampede comes in. 11, count them, right? 11, right? XRP exchange traded fund applications are parked on the SEC's desk like eager kids on the first day of school. Early birds are already live. The 2x long daily XRP ETF snagged $35 million in assets under management faster than I can finish a latte. Now, if that goes toe in the water, imagine the cannonball once Grayscale's kind of spot XRP ETF gets its verdict on May 22nd. So, why does an ETF matter? Because your aunt, who still thinks crypto is a stylish breakfast cereal, can finally own XRP in her retirement account without setting up a wallet or losing her seed phrase to the kind of washing machine. Now, it opens the floodgates for pension funds, university, endowments, and that one sleepy sovereign wealth fund that keeps moving slower than dial-up internet, but, carries a bazooka full of cash. Now, if you're wondering how big that bazooka is, CME Group, basically Wall Street's giant trading arcade, is launching regulated XRP futures on May 19th. Actually, that's probably when this video goes live or shortly after. Now, hedge funds salivate over futures because it lets them go long, go short, upside down, whatever, right? Add those futures to the ETF pipelines and you've got fresh demand ready to chew through that already shrinking supply. And here is where things get spicy. XRP's die-hard community loves to talk ISO 20022, and that's the new global messaging format that will power 80% of high-value payments by the end of 2025. So think of it as upgrading from Morse code to fiber optics for bank transfers. Now, Ripple's platform is already compliant, and while XRP, the token itself, isn't technically stamped ISO, on its kind of forehead anyway, right? Its frictionless dance with RippleNet means that it might as well be wearing a VIP lanyard. Analysts peg the daily volume, swinging through ISO 20022 pipelines at $434 billion. Even snagging a tiny fraction of that changes everything. Now, Cunningham quotes that had me kind of spit out my coffee, went something like this. If XRP isn't between $30 and $75 by the end of 2025, I'd be in utter disbelief. Now that's brave to stand on a hill like that, right? Especially when crypto Twitter loves nothing more than roasting missed calls. But his conviction comes from stitching together three gears of a big machine. Supply squeeze via Hidden Road, demand flood via ETFs and CME futures, and of course, the rails of ISO 20022 greasing cross-border payments. Okay, so let's park the theory and get personal then. Right, remember last spring when the Fed launched FedNow for instant payments? I sent $20 to a buddy in another state faster than I could say gas fees, and I felt a little kind of spark. This is how payments should always feel. Now, XRP isn't wired directly into FedNow, but the trend line is quite clear. Banks and businesses are done with settlement delays, dragging on like Windows 95 downloads. And if you're a bank CFO, staring at old rails and an asset like XRP promises finality in seconds for fractions of a penny, you at least schedule a Zoom call with Ripple to kick the tires. And each of those calls inches the narrative from sci-fi to new normal. But let's talk challenges, because no story is juicy without a villain or two, right? Now, regulation still hangs over XRP like that one dark cloud that refuses to leave the barbecue. Yes, Ripple's partial win against the SEC last year kind of removed the immediate handcuffs, but full clarity is still kind of bureaucratic slow dance, if you will, right? If the SEC decides to keep swinging, short-term jitters could spook weak hands. Then there's the liquidity risk. As prices spike, speculators pile in and spreads widen. So if you're a payment provider relying on tight margins, you want liquidity deep enough to swallow elephant orders without slipping a mile. Now, Cunningham's bet is that ETFs and futures liquidity will solve that kind of right as Hidden Road funnels real utility trades. So creating a self-reinforcing loop then, right? It's kind of like adding lanes to a highway moments before rush hour hits. Instead of gridlock, traffic flows smoother, encouraging more drivers to hop on. So let me paint a picture then of the crunch moment. Imagine it's early June, CME XRP futures are a week old and open interest kind of blows past $1 billion. Grayscale spot ETF finally pings up on brokerage apps with a kind of shiny live button. Hidden Road starts settling a chunk of its daily throws through XRP ledger almost by default because, hey, it's cheaper and faster. Suddenly, 2.7 billion XRP are busy acting like postage stamps on trillion-dollar packages. Now, every exchange notices reserves draining. Market makers, widen their spreads, and retail traders will scramble to snag up what's left. And that's the tipping point, the climax where price doesn't just climb, it bolts. And traders who scoffed at $5 are now scrambling not to miss 15. right? Discords light up, my phone melts, and somewhere Bob from accounting decides to finally, at least it's finally time to stop lurking and actually buy his first bag. And speaking of Discord, before we kind of ride this rocket any higher, let's slide down in the description down below and hit that link to our free crypto Discord server. It's kind of where we nerd out over moves like this in real time, swap charts, and laugh at each other's bad entries. And hey, if you're feeling the urge to kind of trade instead of just speculate, check out the link to 𝗕𝗀𝗀𝗰 as well, right? They're the up and coming exchange that's been outpacing some of the old guard on liquidity. Plus, they're throwing down some pretty decent bonuses, I guess, like confetti. So why don't you go ahead and check it out? Link in the description. So back to the chart. A $10 XRP feels wild because our brains anchor to current price. But step back and consider Bitcoin as at kind of 3 figures a decade ago. Most laughed at 4 figures and 4-digit forecasts then as well. Markets, they don't move linearly, right? They lurch, they stall, and rocket when catalysts cluster. Now, Hidden Road is a catalyst. ETFs are a catalyst. ISO adoption is a catalyst. Each one alone sparks curiosity, but together they can ignite a chain reaction. And of course, targets like $75 makes eyes roll. Let's kind of sanity check it, right? At $75, XRP's market cap would flirt with $4 trillion, basically knocking on the door of gold's ETF adjusted value. Sounds absurd until you realize that global cross-border payments alone hit $156 trillion last year. So capture just 2% of that flow back into a tokenized settlement asset that people actually use, and the math isn't science fiction anymore. It's uncomfortable, sure, but also so was paying $4 for coffee 20 years ago. And here's a weird parallel, right? Remember when Netflix shipped DVDs in red envelopes, right? They looked up one day and said, streaming is the future. Let's just cannibalize our own business, right? Banks and payment giants are staring at blockchain rails the same way that Blockbuster stared at Netflix. The smarter ones will adopt first, locking in market share. If XRP provides the lane change they need, then early movers get the advantage. Late movers, well, they'll eat dust. And we have the retail hive mind. Often underestimate how, fast boardrooms can flip, once a solution is actually de-risked, right? A single green light from a big US bank or a regional kind of payment network using XRP for remittances could snowball. Remember how quickly stablecoin news spread once PayPal kind of dipped a toe, right? The timeline compressed, well, overnight. And Cunningham's final point that kind of stuck with me was about disbelief, right? Disbelief is what powers every parabolic chart. People cling to disbelief because embracing the possibility means admitting they were underexposed. Now, if you've ever hesitated to trade only to watch it 5x, you'll know the feeling. Disbelief is expensive. So whether his exact numbers play out doesn't actually matter as much as acknowledging that forces are aligning that could make disbelief costly once again. So let's land this plane then, right? You've got a sudden supply crunch brewing from Hidden Road siphoning coins. You've got institutional demand gearing up with ETFs and futures. A global payment standard tilting the table in XRP's favor, and a real-time payments wave eroding old rails that charge more than an airport coffee. Right? Stack those, and the price targets start looking less like moon math and more like natural results of pipes finally being the right size for the water that we're sending through them. If you're still sitting on the fence as well, hop into our free crypto Discord server, the link's in the description. You'll see a community dissecting things in real time, and if you're ready to kind of roll up your sleeves, then spin up an account at 𝗕𝗀𝗀𝗰 with my link in the description, grab their sign-up bonuses, and get a feel for trading on an exchange that moves at the kind of speed this market demands. Think about where disbelief has cost you before. and ask whether today's, dismissive chuckle might be tomorrow's why didn't I, right? My bet, the next 18 months will write new chapters in the XRP saga, and you'll want at least front row seats.